The alien ship hung in the darkness above Earth's moon, silent and waiting. Inside, Commander Velshara watched the blue planet below with growing concern. Her species, the Centauri, had been exploring space for thousands of years. They had found many worlds with life, but none like this. Earth was what they called a death world, a place where everything tried to kill everything else. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was rich with oxygen that made fires burn hot and fast. Storms raged across the surface with winds that could tear buildings apart. Earthquakes shook the ground without warning, and the life forms that evolved there were nightmares. Velshara had read the reports 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood. But the data was clear. The dominant species on Earth, humans, were persistence hunters. They chased their prey for days without stopping until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill most species. They could function through pain levels that would leave a Centauri unconscious. "Commander, should we make contact?" her officer asked. Velshara shook her head slowly. "No. We report this to the Galactic Council. Humans must never leave their planet. They are too dangerous." The Council agreed. They placed warning beacons around Earth's solar system. Any human ship that tried to leave would be turned back. It was for the good of the galaxy, they told themselves. Humanity would be safe in their prison, and the peaceful species of the galaxy would be safe from them. 200 years passed. Humanity developed nuclear weapons, computers, and rockets. They built space stations and walked on their moon. Every time they tried to go further, the alien barriers stopped them. Humanity knew they were not alone, but they did not know why they were trapped. Then the Krill came. The Krill were not like the peaceful species of the Galactic Council. They were a hive mind that consumed everything in their path. They had destroyed entire galaxies before, eating every living thing they found. Now they had discovered this galaxy, and they were hungry. The Council's military tried to fight. Their ships were advanced and their weapons powerful, but their soldiers had never experienced real violence. They came from garden worlds where the most dangerous animal was like a small dog. When the Krill attacked with their endless swarms and savage fury, the Council soldiers panicked and ran. Admiral Kresh commanded the Council's largest fleet. He watched his forces crumble in battle after battle. His soldiers were breaking down mentally after just minutes of combat. They had never seen death before. They had never experienced fear like this. Their evolution had made them peaceful, but now that peace was killing them. After losing another major battle, Kresh sent a secret message to his government. There was one species in the galaxy that might survive against the Krill. One species that had evolved in hell and learned to thrive there. But they were locked behind a quarantine barrier for good reason. The Council argued for days. Their civilization was dying. Entire worlds were going silent as the Krill consumed them. Finally, they made their choice. They would free humanity and beg for their help. Jake Morrison was a pilot in Earth's Defense Force. He was flying a routine patrol near Mars when his radio erupted with static. Then a voice spoke in perfect English, though the accent was strange. "Humans of Earth, this is the Galactic Council. We need to talk." Within hours, every government on Earth had received the same message. The aliens explained everything: the quarantine, the reason for it, and the war that was now threatening to destroy the galaxy. They offered humanity a deal: help fight the Krill, and Earth would receive faster-than-light travel, access to alien technology, and a place in galactic society. President Kate Williams sat in the Situation Room with military leaders from around the world. The alien transmission played on the screens around them. "They kept us locked up for 2 centuries, she said. "Treated us like dangerous animals. And now they want us to save them?" General Ryan Foster leaned forward. "They were probably right to be scared of us. Look at our history. We have been perfecting warfare for thousands of years. These aliens come from paradise worlds. They do not understand violence the way we do." "So what do we tell them?" Kate asked. Ryan smiled grimly. "We tell them yes. Not because we want to save them, but because if we wait, the Krill will eventually come here. Better to fight them out there than in our own backyard." The decision was made. Earth would build a fleet, and send soldiers to war. But these would not be like the Council's ships. Human vessels were designed differently. They had thick armor, backup systems for the backup systems, weapons that fired solid metal at incredible speeds, not just energy beams. The Council had built ships for exploring and trading. Humanity had built ships to survive. Captain Amy Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiant, humanity's first faster-than-light warship. Around her, the crew checked their systems one final time. Behind them were 10 more human ships, each carrying soldiers who had volunteered to fight aliens they had never seen for people they had never met. "All systems green," her officer reported. "Ready to jump to light speed." Amy nodded. "Take us out. Let's show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do." The human fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel. They were heading toward a war zone where Council forces were making their last stand. The aliens had spent 200 years keeping humanity locked away because they were afraid. Now they were about to learn they should have been terrified. As the Defiant traveled through, the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vardak system. Admiral Chris Parker stood on the bridge of the Warhammer, studying the tactical display. What he saw made even his experienced eyes widen slightly. Thousands of enemy ships filled the space around the planet. The krill vessels looked organic, like living things made of shell and bone. They moved together with perfect coordination, attacking the Council forces from every direction at once. And the Council was losing badly. "Get me a count," Chris ordered. Lieutenant Danny Hayes worked his console quickly. Estimated enemy strength is between 5,000 and 7,000 vessels. Council forces are down to maybe 300 ships and falling back fast. Chris watched the Council fleet breaking apart on his screen. Their ships were fleeing in random directions. Some were broadcasting surrender signals. Others were just running. It was chaos. "Open a channel to whoever is in command over there." A moment later, Admiral Kresh appeared on the view screen. The alien looked like a large insect with multiple eyes and mandibles. His expression, alien as it was, showed exhaustion and desperation. "Human vessels, this is Admiral Kresh. We are trying to evacuate civilians from the planet. We have maybe 5 hours before the krill overrun our last defenses. After that, 3 billion people will die." Chris nodded calmly. "Admiral Kresh, I am Admiral Parker of Earth. We are here to help. But you need to pull all your forces back immediately and let us handle this." "Pull back? Admiral, we need every ship to hold the line." "No, you need to get your people out of the way before we start shooting. Your crews panic under fire because they have never experienced violence. Mine have been fighting wars since before we invented writing. Trust me, and pull back." Kresh hesitated only a moment, then gave the order. The Council ships began withdrawing deeper into the system, leaving the human fleet alone facing thousands of krill vessels. "All ships, this is Parker. Weapons free. Show them what a death world looks like." The krill swarm surged forward. They had destroyed dozens of Council fleets using the same tactic. Overwhelm the enemy with numbers, absorb their weak attacks, then close to melee range where their bioweapons were deadliest. But the human fleet did not run or break formation. Instead, they accelerated straight toward the swarm. At 500,000 kilometers, the human fleet opened fire. Council weapons were designed to disable ships without killing crews. They were precise and efficient. Human weapons were designed to kill. Railguns fired chunks of metal at 3% of light speed. Missiles carried warheads measured in megatons. Laser batteries pumped enough energy to boil armor. The first salvo tore through the krill front lines like a hot knife through butter. Dozens of bioships exploded or spun away, trailing frozen atmosphere and bodily fluids. The swarm hesitated, confused by prey that fought back so hard. Then the fighters launched. Lieutenant Lisa Grant led her squadron toward the krill formation. Her fighter was small and heavily armored, built around a cannon that fired depleted uranium rounds. It was ugly and brutal, and she loved it. "All wings, break into pairs and go hunting. Do not let them surround you. Keep moving and keep shooting." The human pilots flew with an aggression that shocked the krill. Council pilots retreated when their shields dropped below half. Human pilots flew until their ships were falling apart, then crashed into enemy vessels if they ran out of ammunition. Sergeant Nicole Reed ejected from her fighter after a krill plasma blast tore off her wing. She watched her squadron mates continue fighting as her emergency beacon activated. Defiant, this is Reed. I am punching out. Do not worry about pickup until we win this thing. Negative, Reed. Captain Chen's voice came through her helmet radio. Rescue boats are already on the way. We do not leave our people behind. Nicole smiled inside her helmet. That was the difference. The Council would sacrifice individuals to save the fleet. Humans would risk the fleet to save individuals. It made no logical sense, but it was absolutely terrifying to an enemy. The battle continued for 3 hours. The krill kept attacking, expecting the humans to break like every other species had. Instead, the human fleet just kept fighting. Ships with hull breaches and failing systems stayed in formation. Crews worked through injuries that would have killed most aliens. Admiral Kresh watched from a safe distance, unable to believe what he was seeing. The human fleet had lost 40% of their shields and taken damage to every ship. By Council standards, they should have retreated hours ago. Instead, they were pushing deeper into the krill formation. They fight like they are already dead, his tactical officer whispered. Like they have accepted death and just want to take as many enemies as possible with them. Kresh understood suddenly. That was how you survived on a death world. You never surrendered. You never stopped fighting. You made the Predator pay such a terrible price that it decided to hunt something easier. The krill swarm finally broke when the Warhammer fired its main weapon. The massive railgun accelerated a 1-ton projectile to 20% of light speed. The impact vaporized the krill command ship and created a shockwave that disabled dozens of surrounding vessels. For the first time in their existence, the krill had encountered prey more dangerous than themselves. The swarm began to flee, their ships jumping to faster than light travel in every direction. Chris watched them go with cold satisfaction. All ships, cease fire. I want damage reports. The reports came in quickly. 5 destroyers were complete losses. 20 ships needed major repairs. 4,000 soldiers were dead or wounded. By Council standards, it was a disaster. By human standards, it was a victory. Admiral Kresh, this is Parker. The system is secure. Your evacuation ships can proceed. Kresh's face appeared on the screen again, and this time he looked shocked. Admiral, your casualties are terrible. How can you call this a victory? Because we achieved our objective, Chris replied simply. We held the line. We saved the civilians. The cost was high, but acceptable given the situation. That is how war works, Admiral. After the transmission ended, Chris turned to his crew. Get me full damage assessments and casualty lists. Then I want repair crews working around the clock. This was just one swarm. Intelligence says there are hundreds more between here and Krill space. 3 months after the Battle of Vardax, General Ryan Foster stood in front of a room full of alien officers. They came from a dozen different species, all evolved on peaceful garden worlds. Now they needed to learn how to fight like humans. War is not about technology, Ryan explained, his voice carrying across the training facility. It is about will. The Krill have been beating you because they want to win more than you want to live. That changes today. The alien officers shifted uncomfortably. Counselor Thexera, representing the Andorian collective, raised her hand. She was tall and graceful, evolved from herd animals on a low-gravity world. The very concept of violence went against everything her species believed. General Foster, many council members are concerned about human methods. Your forces have been very aggressive. Some feel you are making the war worse. Ryan turned to face her directly. Counselor, with respect, you do not get to criticize our methods while we are saving your civilization. The Krill do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. The only way to stop them is to kill them faster than they can breed. That requires aggression. Another counselor spoke up. But your casualties. 50,000 dead in 3 months. Why do your people keep volunteering for such dangerous work? Captain Nicole Reed, standing near the back of the room, answered. Because that is what we do. On Earth, our ancestors fought and died to protect their families and their homes. That is built into us. You evolved in paradise. We evolved in hell. And hell teaches you that sometimes you have to destroy what threatens you to protect what you love. The training continued. Human instructors were teaching alien soldiers things they had never imagined. How to keep fighting when injured. How to function through fear. How to hold a position even when retreat seemed like the only option. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, Lieutenant Jake Morrison showed a group of Centauri officers their new combat vehicles. The transport was massive, covered in thick armor and bristling with weapons. "This is the Grizzly Armored Personnel Carrier," Jake explained. "It is designed to drive straight through enemy fire, drop off troops in combat zones, and keep fighting even when badly damaged. It has redundant systems, manual backup controls, and enough armor to survive almost anything." The Centauri officers stared at the vehicle with obvious horror. Their own transports were sleek and fast, designed to avoid combat completely. "Lieutenant Morrison, this vehicle has no escape pods," one officer said. "What happens if it is disabled in combat?" Jake shrugged. "Then the crew fights from inside it until help arrives or they run out of ammunition. Then they repair it and keep fighting. Look, I know this is hard for you. Your instinct when you see danger is to run. Our instinct is to charge at it while shooting." The training was brutal. Human instructors pushed alien recruits to their breaking points and beyond. Many quit in the first week, but those who survived began to change. They stood straighter, moved with more confidence. Most importantly, they stopped panicking under fire. Sergeant Danny Hayes ran a combat exercise for mixed human and Verpine troops. The scenario was simple. Defend a civilian shelter against a Krill assault with limited ammunition and no reinforcements coming. The Verpine soldiers, insect-like aliens with compound eyes and natural armor, fought well at first. They followed their training and held their positions. But when the simulated Krill broke through the outer defenses, their instincts took over. They started falling back, looking for escape routes. Danny's voice boomed across the training ground. "Verpine squad, halt! Where are you going?" The squad leader, a young officer named Crescital, looked back with fear in his eyes. "Sergeant, the position is lost. We need to evacuate the civilians and retreat." "Wrong. The position is lost when the last defender stops fighting. Get back to your posts. We are running this drill until you learn that sometimes there is no retreat. Sometimes you hold the line or people die. Now move." The training continued for hours until the Verpine soldiers finally began fighting like humans. It went against every instinct their evolution had given them, but slowly they were learning the Deathworld way. Back on Earth, the war had become personal for everyone. News broadcasts showed refugee camps full of displaced aliens. Children watched footage of human soldiers fighting impossible odds to protect Council worlds. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. President Kate Williams met with her military advisors to discuss the next phase. Intelligence reports were troubling. The Krill had started targeting human ships specifically, recognizing them as the main threat. "They are learning about us," Intelligence Director Chris Baldwin explained. "They figured out that humans are holding the Council forces together. If they can break our fleet, the whole alliance collapses." Kate nodded. "Then we hit them first. What do you recommend?" "We call it Operation Hellstorm. We take the fight to their breeding worlds and destroy them. It will be bloody and we will lose a lot of people, but it is the only way to stop them from replacing their losses faster than we can kill them." "The Council will never approve bombing planets," Kate said. "They still believe in rules of war, even against an enemy trying to eat them." Chris smiled coldly. "Then we do not ask permission. We identify the targets, launch the strikes, and tell the Council afterward." It was dangerous. Humanity acting alone, ignoring Council authority. But Kate had seen the reports from Council defensive campaigns. Their way was not working. The human way was brutal, but effective. "Do it," she ordered, "and may God help us." 3 days later, Admiral Amy Chen led a strike force deep into Krill space. Intelligence had found 12 breeding worlds, where the Krill were hatching new warriors by the billions. The human fleet carried weapons banned by the Council, planet killers designed to sterilize entire worlds. As the Warhammer approached the first target, Amy thought about what they were going to do. She was about to order the deaths of billions. It was necessary, it was justified, but it would still haunt her forever. "Target locked," her weapons officer reported. "Planetary weapons ready." Amy took a deep breath. Fire. The missiles streaked down through the atmosphere. Each warhead carried enough destructive power to crack continents and ignite the air itself. Within minutes, the breeding world was a ball of fire. Billions of krill died instantly. 11 more worlds burned that day. The Council reacted with outrage when they learned what humanity had done. Emergency sessions were called. Sanctions were threatened. Some demanded humanity be expelled from the Alliance immediately, but they did not follow through. Because despite their anger, the plan had worked. The krill's ability to replace losses was crippled. For the first time since the war began, Council forces were winning more battles than they lost. The Death World doctrine was brutal and merciless. It went against everything the Council believed, but it was keeping them alive. And deep down, every Council member knew the terrible truth. They needed humanity's capacity for violence far more than humanity needed their approval. 6 months into the war, humanity had military forces on over 200 worlds. Admiral Chris Parker now commanded a fleet of 300 vessels, mixing human warships with Council designs rebuilt using human engineering. The transformation was nearly complete. Council species that once fled at the first sign of danger now held their ground under heavy fire. Alien soldiers who had never experienced violence now fought with grim determination. Human instructors had turned them into warriors, but the price was terrible. Lieutenant Lisa Grant sat in the pilot-ready room of the carrier Indomitable, staring at the memorial wall. It listed every human pilot killed in action. The names covered 3 entire panels now, and more were added after every battle. Over 12,000 pilots dead. That was more than the entire Council military had lost in a century of peacetime. "You okay?" Commander Jake Morrison asked, sitting beside her. Lisa did not look away from the wall. "I am doing the math. At our current rate, we will have lost everyone we started with in 18 months. The training program cannot keep up." Jake nodded. "I know. Command knows too. But what is the alternative? We pull back and let the Council handle their own defense? Remember Sirius Prime when we were not there? 30 million civilians dead in 6 hours. So we just keep feeding soldiers into the grinder until the krill are all dead or we are? That is war, Lisa. Real war. People die. Good people. But if we do not fight, more people die. That is the choice." The alert klaxon interrupted them. Another krill swarm detected, this time heading for New Shanghai, one of humanity's most important factory worlds. The fleet began launching fighters before the briefing started. On the ground at New Shanghai, Sergeant Nicole Reed trained local militia. The civilians had volunteered to defend their homes, but most had never fired a weapon. Nicole had 1 week to turn them into something resembling soldiers. "The krill fight in swarms," she explained, showing them firing positions behind makeshift barricades. "They will try to overwhelm you with numbers. Do not panic. Pick your targets, save your ammunition, and trust the person next to you. If someone falls, you keep fighting. Mourn later. Survive now." A young volunteer named Lisa Wong raised her hand nervously. "Sergeant, what if we cannot hold them? What if they break through?" Nicole met her eyes directly. "Then you fall back to the next line and hold there. And if that breaks, you fall back again. And if you run out of places to fall back to, you find a good spot and make them pay for every meter. Because the alternative is letting them kill your family." The honesty seemed to help. The volunteers knew what was at stake. They just needed someone to tell them the truth. The krill attacked 3 days later. Admiral Parker's fleet intercepted the swarm at the system's edge, but the krill had learned from previous battles. They split their forces, sending part of the swarm against the fleet, while a second group used stealth to slip past toward the planet. "Damn it," Chris muttered as his tactical display updated. "They are learning. All fighters, emergency launch. Ground forces, this is Parker. You have incoming. Multiple landing craft, estimated 30,000 hostiles. Hold as long as you can. We will provide orbital support once we clear the main swarm." Nicole watched the sky darken as krill landing craft descended. Her platoon was positioned on a main road leading into the civilian districts. Behind them were 3 million people who could not evacuate in time. "Here they come," she said calmly. "Weapons free. Make every shot count." The first wave hit like a living tsunami. Krill warriors were bigger than humans, with armored shells and multiple limbs ending in sharp claws. They moved fast, using overwhelming numbers to break defensive lines. Human weapons opened fire with continuous roaring. The militia volunteers fired desperately, their training barely keeping terror at bay. For 15 minutes, the line held as defenders poured fire into the advancing swarm. Then the Krill adapted. They started using their dead as shields, building walls from fallen warriors that bullets could not penetrate fast enough. The defensive line began to break. "Second platoon, fall back to checkpoint Bravo," Nicole ordered. "Fighting retreat, move and shoot." The retreat was chaos. Volunteers who had held together through adrenaline now faced close combat reality. Some panicked, some froze. Some died fighting, buying seconds for others to escape. Nicole grabbed Lisa Wong as the young woman hesitated, staring at a fallen friend. "Move now, mourn later. That is the rule. Break it, and you die too." The harsh words worked. Lisa stumbled backward, still firing her rifle. They reached checkpoint Bravo, a fortified intersection, and set up new positions. Above them, space battle raged. Lisa Grant's fighter squadron was outnumbered 5-1, dodging through plasma fields while trying to thin the swarm enough for capital ships to break through. "Gold leader, this is Gold 7. I have 3 on my tail. Cannot shake them." "On it. Break left on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Break." Lisa dove through a maneuver that would have killed most aliens from the forces alone. Her targeting computer locked onto the pursuing krill craft, and she fired. Her cannon tore one apart. Her wingman got the other 2. "Thanks, boss. I owe you a drink. Add it to my tab. Gold Squadron, reform on me. We are going to punch a hole so the destroyers can use their railguns." The squadron dove into the swarm's heart, trading safety for the ability to draw fire away from capital ships. It was suicide by Council standards. For human pilots, it was another day. The battle lasted 8 hours. When the Krill finally retreated, New Shanghai was in ruins. Entire districts were leveled. Casualties exceeded 300,000, military and civilian combined. By any previous standard, it was disaster. But the city had not fallen. The civilians were defended. And the Krill swarm was destroyed so badly it would take months to rebuild. President Kate Williams arrived 2 days later to survey damage and meet survivors. She walked through field hospitals where human and alien wounded lay together, treated by medics running on stimulants and willpower. Counselor Thexera accompanied her. The Andorian had criticized human methods loudly. Now she stood silent, staring at devastation. "This is what war really looks like," Kate said quietly. "Not clean space battles. This. Blood and rubble and people dying in pain. This is why my species evolved the way we did. Earth taught us that sometimes the choice is not between peace and war. It is between fighting and dying." Thexara's voice trembled. "How do your people endure this? How do they keep fighting after seeing such horror? Because if we do not, the horror spreads. The Krill do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They just consume. So we fight because the alternative is extinction, not just for humanity but for every species in this galaxy." 1 year after first contact, the war reached its final stage. The Krill had been pushed back to their home territory, a cluster of star systems in the galactic rim. The Council's forces, trained and equipped using human methods, could now hold defensive positions without constant human support. General Ryan Foster stood before a holographic map of Krill space, surrounded by Council military leaders and his senior officers. The room represented something unprecedented, dozens of species working together under human leadership. "This is Operation Final Dawn," Ryan explained, moving pieces on the holographic display. "We hit all 7 core worlds simultaneously with everything we have. The Krill have pulled back all remaining forces to defend their home. They are making their last stand." Admiral Chris Parker studied the plan carefully. Casualties? Projected losses are 30% of all forces. That means 60,000 human personnel and 200,000 Council troops. The Council representatives looked uncomfortable at the numbers, but no one objected. They had learned that some prices must be paid. "There is one more thing," Ryan continued. "Intelligence believes the Krill have one final trick. They have been digging massive tunnel networks on their homeworlds. They plan to go underground and force us into a years-long campaign to dig them out. Captain Amy Chen leaned forward. Let me guess. You have a solution the Council will hate? Ryan smiled grimly. The Krill homeworlds are geologically unstable. We can use seismic charges to trigger massive tectonic failures. Basically, we crack the planets open from the inside. The silence was profound. Ryan was describing genocide on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Complete extermination of a species by destroying their homeworlds. Counselor Thexera, who had spent a year learning to think like a warrior, spoke carefully. General Foster, I understand the necessity. But we must consider the ethics. If we do this, do we become what we fight? No, Nicole Reed said, from her position along the wall. The decorated Marine was now an advisor on ground operations. The Krill consume everything. We fight for survival. There is a difference between stopping a threat to all life and being a mindless predator. Is there? Thexera challenged. Where do we draw the line? When does necessary violence become unjustifiable cruelty? Kate Williams stood up. That is a question humans have asked ourselves for thousands of years. Every war we fought, we balanced necessity against morality. And you know what we learned? If you are not willing to do what is necessary, you lose. And if you lose, the enemy does not care about your moral superiority. They just kill you. The vote was called. The Council approved Operation Final Dawn by a narrow margin. It was not enthusiastic support, but it was enough. The final battle began 3 weeks later. Lieutenant Lisa Grant led her fighter squadron in the first strike against the Krill home world of Crix Prime. Her wings had been reduced to 30% of original strength through constant combat. The survivors were hardened veterans, but the losses weighed heavily. All wings, this is Gold Leader. Primary objective is air superiority over landing zones. Secondary is suppressing ground weapons so the fleet can move into bombardment range. Stay tight, watch your fuel, and come home alive. The Krill defenders rose to meet them like an angry swarm. The dogfight that followed was the largest aerospace battle in galactic history. Thousands of fighters from dozens of species clashed with Krill biofighters in combat that stretched across orbital space. Lisa lost count of enemies killed. Her fighter's hull was scorched from near misses and her oxygen tasted stale. But she kept flying, kept fighting, because that was what you did when you came from a death world. You kept going until the job was done or you were dead. On the ground, Sergeant Danny Hayes led mixed human and Verpine troops through Krill tunnel networks. The fighting was brutal, close combat in darkness, lit only by muzzle flashes and glowing Krill biology. Contact front, swarm incoming. The Marines opened fire, their weapons creating a wall of bullets that tore through attacking Krill. The Verpine soldiers fought alongside them with the same desperate intensity. Their earlier hesitation burned away by months of combat. Fall back to Junction 7, Danny ordered. We need to clear before the seismic charges blow. The retreat was orderly and professional. These were not the panicky council troops from a year ago. These were soldiers who had learned the Death World way. Never run from a fight, but know when to give ground to win. The seismic charges detonated across all 7 Krill homeworlds within 30 minutes. The results were catastrophic. Tectonic plates shifted, volcanoes erupted, massive earthquakes shattered cities and tunnel networks. Billions of Krill died in minutes as their worlds tore themselves apart. Admiral Chris Parker watched from the Warhammer's bridge as Crix Prime's crust fractured, exposing molten interior. It was the most destructive act humanity had ever committed. The death toll exceeded every war in human history combined. All ships, pull back to safe distance, he ordered. Let the planets die. The Krill did not surrender. They could not. They were a hive mind driven purely by instinct to consume and reproduce. They fought until the last warrior was dead, their queens killed, their homeworlds reduced to slag. When it finally ended, casualty reports came in. Human losses: 97,000 dead, 300,000 wounded. Council forces: 400,000 dead, over 1 million wounded. The cost had been staggering. But the Krill were extinct. 3 months later, Earth hosted the first galactic summit in human space. Representatives from every council species gathered at the newly built United Nations Galactic Assembly Building in Geneva. Kate Williams addressed the assembly. "1 year ago, you came asking for help. You offered us the stars in exchange for our warriors. We accepted and paid the price in blood." She paused. "Now the war is over. The question is, what kind of galaxy do we build?" Councillor Thexar arose. "Representative Williams, I apologize on behalf of the Council for quarantining your species for 2 centuries. We were afraid of what Deathworlders might do if they reached the stars. We were right to be afraid, but wrong to imprison you. You saved us at terrible cost to yourselves." Kate nodded. "The Council made mistakes, but so did we. We brought our violence to your peaceful galaxy and many died. Not just Krill. We lost some of our own humanity saving yours." Admiral Kresh spoke up. "I fought alongside humans for a year. I watched them die protecting worlds they had never heard of. And I learned something about Deathworlders. Humans are violent, yes, aggressive and dangerous, but they are also fiercely protective of allies. They value individual lives in ways we never did. They risk everything to save one person because their evolution taught them every member of the tribe matters." General Ryan Foster joined Kate at the podium. "The Council wants to know what happens now. Here is our proposal. Earth joins the Council as a full member with conditions. We maintain our military. We train Council species in defense. And we establish the Galactic Defense Force, a unified military under human doctrine." "You want to militarize the galaxy," one counselor objected. 5 years after the war ended, the galaxy looked completely different. The peaceful civilization that had kept humanity quarantined was gone, replaced by something stronger and more prepared for the universe's harsh realities. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the parade ground of the Galactic Defense Force Academy, watching the newest class of graduates march past. The formation included humans, Verpine, Centauri, Andorians, and a dozen other species. They moved with the same confident precision, trained in the Deathworld way of war. "Hard to believe, is it not?" Nicole Reed said beside him. She had retired from active combat after taking serious injuries at New Shanghai, but now served as the Academy's senior instructor. 5 years ago, most of these species had never fired a weapon. Now they are elite soldiers, Jake nodded. "We changed them, changed the whole galaxy. I am still not sure if that was the right thing to do. It was necessary. That has to be enough." The graduation ceremony concluded with speeches from military leaders and council representatives. The graduates would be assigned to defense posts across hundreds of worlds, protecting the peace that had been won at such terrible cost. Admiral Chris Parker, now Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces, gave the keynote address. He stood at the podium, older and more tired than he had been at the war's start. The weight of commanding forces that lost over 100,000 soldiers showed in his eyes. "You are the first generation trained from the beginning in combined arms warfare," he told the graduates. "You will never know what it was like before, when council species panicked at the first sign of danger. You have been forged in the Deathworld tradition of never surrendering, never giving up, always protecting those who cannot protect themselves." He paused, looking over the assembled soldiers. "But remember this, we did not teach you violence for its own sake. We taught you violence so you could protect peace. There is a difference. Never forget it." In orbit above Earth, the new defensive installations represented the cutting edge of combined human and alien technology. Massive battle stations armed with railguns and energy weapons stood ready to defend against any threat. The solar system that had been a prison for 200 years was now the most heavily fortified location in the galaxy. President Kate Williams, now in her second term, met with her cabinet to discuss the state of galactic affairs. Earth had become the unofficial capital of the new order, hosting both the Galactic Council headquarters and the Military Command Center. "The latest reports show stability across all major sectors," her chief of staff reported. "Piracy is down. Trade is up. The Council species have adapted well to the new reality." Kate nodded but did not look satisfied. "And our casualties? How many soldiers have we lost to small conflicts in the past year?" 732, Madam President, plus about 2,000 wounded. Kate closed her eyes briefly. Even in peacetime, humans were dying to protect the galaxy. The price of being the Deathworld species never ended. Make sure their families receive full benefits and honors, she said quietly, and that the council representatives see the casualty reports. I want them to remember what we sacrificed for them. Across the galaxy, humanity had spread to hundreds of worlds. Some were colonies, places where humans built new homes under alien stars. Others were military bases, fortresses watching for threats from deep space. Everywhere they went, humans brought their Deathworld perspective. Always be ready, always be vigilant, because danger never sleeps. Lieutenant Lisa Grant, now a training officer, taught young pilots the lessons she had learned through blood and fire. Her classroom walls were covered with photos of fallen pilots, a reminder of the cost of carelessness. Speed and aggression win dogfights, she told her students, a mix of human and alien cadets. But survival requires knowing when to break off. Your job is not to die heroically. Your job is to complete the mission and come home. Dead heroes cannot protect anyone. One of her students, a young Centauri named Velkan, raised his hand. Instructor Grant, my people tell stories of the war. They say humans fought like they were already dead, that you did not care about survival. Lisa smiled sadly. We cared about survival very much, but we understood something your people are still learning. Sometimes the only way to survive is to be willing to die. If you fly scared, you die scared. If you fly like you have already accepted death, you fight smarter and harder. That is the Deathworld paradox. The Galactic Council formally renamed itself the United Galactic Commonwealth, acknowledging that the old hierarchy of elder races no longer applied. Humanity held key positions not through conquest but through earned respect. They had proven themselves the galaxy's guardians. Counselor Thexara, who had opposed human methods at the war's start, now served as the Commonwealth's ambassador to Earth. She had learned more about humanity in 5 years than most aliens learned in a lifetime. Your species fascinates me, she told Kate during a private dinner at the White House. You are capable of such violence, yet you build monuments to peace. You create terrible weapons, yet you cry over individual deaths. You are walking contradictions. Kate sipped her wine thoughtfully. That is what coming from a death world does to you. It teaches you that life is precious because it is fragile. We value peace because we know the cost of war. We build weapons because we know that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to destroy the guilty. It is not a contradiction, it is balance. And do you ever regret it? Taking on the role of galactic protector? Kate was quiet for a long moment. Every day. Every time I see a casualty report or visit a military hospital. But would I change it? No. Because the alternative is letting peaceful species like yours face threats alone. And I have seen what happens then. The memorial on Earth's moon had grown into the largest monument humanity had ever built. Names covered walls that stretched for miles. Every human who died in the war and the peacekeeping operations that followed was listed. Over 130,000 names, each representing a person who volunteered to fight for people they had never met. Admiral Amy Chen, retired from active duty but still serving as an advisor, visited the memorial on the anniversary of the war's end. She walked slowly along the walls, reading names. So many of them had served under her command. A young couple approached her, clearly tourists from one of the council worlds. The female, a Verpine, worked up courage to speak. Excuse me, are you Admiral Chen? Amy nodded. I am. I wanted to thank you. My world was one of the first the Krill attacked. My family was evacuated because human ships held the line long enough. Without your people, I would not exist. Amy smiled sadly. Thank the names on these walls. They are the real heroes. I just gave orders. After the couple left, Amy stood alone before the memorial. She thought about all the decisions she had made during the war. The attacks she ordered. The soldiers she sent into battle knowing some would not return. The planets she had destroyed. She carried those decisions like physical weight. But she would make them again if necessary, because that was what Deathworlders did. They made the hard choices so others did not have to. Back at the academy, Jake Morrison prepared for another training exercise. His students were learning urban combat, how to clear buildings room by room while minimizing civilian casualties. It was delicate, dangerous work that required discipline and control. Remember, he told them as they prepared to begin, violence is a tool, not a goal. You use exactly as much as needed to achieve your objective and no more. That is what separates soldiers from murderers. That is what separates us from the Krill. The exercise began, and Jake watched his students move through the simulated city with growing satisfaction. They were learning. Not just how to fight, but why to fight and when to stop. That was the real lesson humanity had to teach the galaxy. That night, Kate Williams stood on the White House balcony, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, human soldiers stood watch over dozens of worlds. Ships patrolled the void between stars. Scientists searched for new threats before they could become crises. The galaxy was safer than it had been in 1,000 years. But that safety came at a price paid daily in human blood and sacrifice. Her chief of staff found her there. Madam President, the Commonwealth Council has officially voted to name humanity the primary protectorate species. It is mostly symbolic, but it acknowledges our role. Kate smiled without humor. A fancy title for being the galaxy's soldiers. I am sure that will comfort the families of the dead. It is more than that. It is recognition. Respect. 5 years ago, we were prisoners. Now, we are leaders. We are guardians, Kate corrected. There is a difference. Leaders seek power. Guardians accept responsibility. We did not ask for this role, but we will fulfill it because the alternative is unacceptable. She turned to face him. Make sure that every human serving in the defense forces knows something. They are not just soldiers. They are the reason the galaxy sleeps peacefully at night. They are the shield between civilization and chaos. That matters. That will always matter. As Kate returned inside, a message came through from deep space. A long-range scout had detected anomalous signals from beyond the galactic rim. Unknown origin, possibly hostile. The Commonwealth was preparing a response, but the first ships dispatched would be human, because when danger threatened, when the unknown loomed in the darkness, the galaxy no longer called the Council. They called the Deathworlders, the species that evolved in hell and learned not just to survive but to protect. The species that understood violence intimately enough to control it. The species that proved that the most dangerous thing in the universe could also be its greatest guardian. When the galaxy messed up and let threats through their defenses, humanity rose not to dominance through force, but to leadership through sacrifice. And as long as the stars needed guardians, humans would answer the call, because that was what Deathworlders did. They stood between the darkness and the light, paying the price so others would not have to. And they would keep standing that watch until the universe itself grew cold. No, Amy Chen replied. We want to make sure when the next threat emerges, you do not need to beg Deathworlders for help. We want you able to defend yourselves. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The Council had seen what happened when peaceful species faced extinction. They could accept human military leadership or hope the universe stayed peaceful forever. They chose survival over idealism. The galaxy had changed forever. Paradise worlds that never knew violence now maintained armies. Species evolved from prey animals now trained youth in combat. The age of innocence ended, replaced by pragmatic acceptance of universal dangers. The Deathworlders had risen not through conquest but through sacrifice. Humanity became the galaxy's shield, its sword, and its conscience. And the stars would never be the same. That evening, Kate received updated casualty reports for the entire war. Total human military losses: 73,000 dead, 200,000 wounded. The Council was preparing to award humanity their highest honors and offer full representation in government. Kate stared at the numbers and felt only exhaustion. They had won the galaxy's respect by proving they could endure losses that would break any other species. They had become the galaxy's shield, standing between peaceful civilizations and the void's nightmares. But victory was starting to look less like triumph and more like survival. And Kate was not sure which would run out first: Krill to kill or human soldiers willing to die. The memorial walls kept growing. The casualty lists kept lengthening. And somewhere in deep space, the Krill were gathering their remaining forces for one final battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The galaxy was learning that sometimes survival required doing things that made you sick to think about. Sometimes the only way to protect billions was to kill billions. It was a lesson humanity had learned long ago on their violent world. Now they were teaching it to the stars. As the crew moved to follow orders, Chris allowed himself a moment of thought. The Galactic Council had quarantined humanity because they were afraid. They had seen Earth's violence and decided humans were too dangerous for the galaxy. They had been completely right. But now the galaxy needed that danger. Needed the species that had learned to survive where everything wanted them dead. Needed Deathworlders who understood that sometimes the only way to protect life was to take it. The Krill had spent thousands of years consuming peaceful civilizations. Now they were about to learn what happened when you attacked a galaxy that had finally released its apex predators. On the planet below, the civilian evacuation continued under the protection of human warships. 3 billion people who would have died were now safe. And every one of them owed their lives to soldiers from a species they had been taught to fear. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is exactly what you need to survive. Oh, the strange space between normal space? Amy thought about what they were flying toward. The Council had described the Krill as unstoppable. They said entire fleets had been wiped out in hours. They said the Krill showed no mercy and took no prisoners. But the Council had never fought humans before. They had never seen what a species from a death world could do when they decided something needed to die. Earth had produced humanity through millions of years of violence and struggle. Every predator on their planet had tried to eat their ancestors. Disease had tried to wipe them out. Ice ages had frozen their world. Volcanic eruptions had blocked out the sun. And humanity had survived it all. The Krill were about to face prey that was more dangerous than any predator. They were about to learn what happened when you threatened a species that had climbed to the top of the food chain on a planet where everything wanted them dead. The quarantine was broken. The Deathworlders were loose in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again.